Well, I spent some time this summer hiking a stretch of the Appalachian Trail in New Hampshire. Now, for those of you guys who aren't familiar with the AT, it's a continuous hiking trail that goes along the spine of the Appalachian Mountains, about 2,200 miles from Springer Mountain in Georgia, and goes all the way up to Mount Katahdin in Maine. And so I was able to bookend my summer with hiking trips on the Appalachian Trail up in New Hampshire, one of my favorite places in the world. And last weekend, wrapping things up, I was up on the ridgeline there in the White Mountains, and got to enjoy dinner with some new friends of mine that I had made on the trail. They're what you call through hikers. Through hikers are people who have set out over the course of somewhere between 5 and 7 months to hike the entire Appalachian Trail, all 2,200 miles. And they're great, these hippies and these retirees who got some time on their hands. And being in New Hampshire at this point means that they are nearing the end of their through hike. They've got the rest of New Hampshire and then Maine to go. And so I had the best time over my camp stove, them over their camp stoves, preparing our meals and talking, and then having our meals together and just swapping stories and laughing. It was so good. And let me tell you, 1,800 miles into their journey, they had lots of stories to tell, as you can imagine. And sitting around, eating and learning, listening and laughing with them just reminded me as to how important the craft of storytelling is for every culture, every generation. And so today we wrap up a summer looking at the stories of Jesus, the parables of Jesus. Jesus was the ultimate storyteller, just phenomenal at it. And his parables are there in order to illustrate for us important lessons about who God is and about what his kingdom is like. And so you have listened to 10 parables over the course of the summer. And I want to challenge us not to have listened to them only and learn from them only, but now to begin to practice sharing those stories. You go and tell the story of the prodigal son. You go tell the story of the Pharisee and the tax collector. If you got children, ask them to share the story as best as they can, because we want to be like Jesus and we want to share stories. We want to share his story because we have the story, don't we? We've got the story that needs to be told. And so let's grow as storytellers. I remember when I was a kid, I think it was 9, 10, 11 years old, somewhere in late elementary school. I had a camp out in my backyard. And so we had the tent set up, and I had some of my buddies over. And we were out around the tent late at night. And my neighbor comes over. He's the cool neighbor, the teenager that we all looked up to. And his name was Jared. And he goes, "Oh, camp out, huh? You guys want to hear a ghost story?" And we all kind of reluctantly, peer pressure, said, sure. And so he gets into the story. And I don't remember a whole lot about the story, but I do remember his tactic. And he gets into this story, and it's something about a pack of wild neighborhood dogs that would gather at night and roam the neighborhood. And so we start second-guessing our decision to camp outside with these dogs on the loose. And so he gets into his story, and then he says, "True story, by the way." And he leans in, and he goes through all the details of the story, and then he starts to slow his pace down a little bit, and we're leaning in, and then he brings his volume down to just a whisper, and we're listening. And rah! And he screams, and we all scream, and we jump back, and he never even had to finish the story because we wet our pants, and it was terrifying. And I just know that from that point forward, I wanted to be like Jared. And every sleepover I ever had from that point forward, I'd get the guys together and be like, "You guys want to hear a scary story?" And I'd practice my tactic to do it just like Jared, and never could quite get it right. He was so good at it. And I just want to encourage us to learn from these stories, but also to learn to share these stories. Jesus has given them to us because they're memorable, and they're repeatable, and they're also really easy to learn important truths from. And so I get the honor today to share with you our last parable for the summer from Matthew chapter 20. And so if you have a Bible, get to Matthew chapter 20. We've got Bibles right there in front of you, so grab that, use the table of contents, no shame. Get over to Matthew and follow the numbers right to chapter 20. And this is a story of Jesus that many people find frustrating. It's frustrating. Why? Because it's a story about fairness. Now, if you're a parent of more than one child, a phrase that I have learned, and I know you will learn, that you will hear often is, "That's not fair. You ever heard that? That's not fair, as they constantly assess your treatment of them and your treatment of their siblings in comparison. And that's what this story from Jesus really has going on here. It's a story of a vineyard owner who goes out and hires some day laborers, but he treats the laborers each differently, and as a result, he's accused of being unfair. And so Matthew chapter 20, we'll pick up in verse 1 and read this together. Jesus says, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a master of a house who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. And after agreeing," hold on to that word, "after agreeing with the laborers for a denarius a day, he sent them into his vineyard. And going out about the third hour, he saw others standing idle in the marketplace. And he said to them, 'You go into the vineyard too, and whatever is right, I will give you.' And so they went. And going out again about the 6th hour and the 9th hour, he did the same. And about the 11th hour, he went out and found others standing. And he said to them, 'Why do you stand here idle all day?' And they said to him, 'Because no one has hired us.' And he said to them, 'You go into the vineyard too.' When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, 'Call the laborers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last all the way up to the first.' And when those hired about the 11th hour came, each of them received," get this, "a denarius. Now, when those hired first came, they thought that they would receive more, but each of them also received a denarius. And on receiving it, they grumbled at the master of the house, saying, 'These last worked only 1 hour, and you made them equal to us, who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat.' But he replied to one of them, 'Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for a denarius? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give this last worker as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or do you begrudge my generosity? So the last will be first, and the first will be last.'" Do you feel it? Do you feel somewhere in your gut a little bit frustrated perhaps by the story? You can see how other people may feel frustrated by this story. For those people who have been working all day long in the scorching heat, you kind of feel that. And with this story, what Jesus does is he masterfully exposes some issues within our own hearts, some double standards that we may have, a lack of joy when other people are blessed and not necessarily us. Now, back to my kids, and that's not fair. My wife and I, we try really hard as parents to be equitable. We do our best, right? Point in case. We want our kids to learn how to help out around the house. And so for many, many years, they've been helping us with unloading the dishwasher. And what we have done in an attempt to be fair is we have divided our dishwasher up into 3 sections. We have the top rack, we have the bottom rack, and then we have the silverware tray. One for each of our children. So when it's time to unload the dishwasher, I think it's pretty fair, right? There's plenty of evidence that we are fair parents. And yet, every so often, I'll be out with one of our kids, and I just want to bless them, I just want to bless them and say, "Hey, you want to go to Dunkin' and grab a nice coffee or a culotta?" And so we do it. And we grab the drink, and if we get back to the house and the drink is not gone at this point, I have to oftentimes kind of give them a little bit of a lecture. Like, listen, when you go in, I don't want you to lie. I don't want you to hide the drink. Just don't rub it in, Just don't rub it in. And it seems like most of the time, they didn't listen to me. They walk into the house, this is so good. Thanks, Dad. To which the other kids go, "Dad, how could you? The injustice." It's like some kind of dramatic, forgetting that, usually a few days later, a week later, I probably took one of them out to Starbucks or some special treat. I try to keep it fair in my own head. And here's the deal, right? This parable that we're looking at is not about somebody being cheated or shortchanged. This parable is about somebody being blessed. That's what it's about. So let's review the parable a little bit. Jesus says there's a master of the house, a vineyard owner who needs some day laborers. And so early in the morning, he gets up to go find help. I remember where I grew up, there was a street corner where lots of people would stand if they were looking for some work. And so some contractors or some people needing someone to help unload a moving truck would go and say, come on, I got some work for you. And they'd come and they would help. You can kind of picture that. The master goes out to this scene, first thing in the morning, and he goes and he finds some laborers and he talks to the laborers and they agree with the master for 1 denarius a day. That's a good day's wage in that day and age. A few hours later, he goes out. It's now the 3rd hour, and he finds some more laborers, right? Now, in this day, a work day was 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., and it was divided up into 4 3-hour increments. So 6 to 9, 9 to 12, 12 to 3, 3 to 6. That was your day. And so he hires workers at 6 a.m., agrees, a denarius a day. He goes back out 3 hours later, 9 a.m., and he agrees that these people work for him and he'll give them whatever is right, is what is said. He goes out again the 6th hour, that would be noon. He goes out again the 9th hour, that would be 3 o'clock. And then finally, he goes out one last time at the 11th hour. This is where the phrase, the 11th hour comes from. It comes out the 11th hour at 5 p.m., 1 hour before the day of work will officially end. And he asks those people, why have you been standing here idle all day? And they say, because no one's hired us. Nobody's come and give us an opportunity. He says, you also can come with me to my vineyard. And so here's what we have. We have lots of happy people standing around working. Lots of people who have employment, who are now being blessed. Everybody's happy until it's pay time. Pay time, the foreman is divvying out the money, and he's instructed to start with the last people who came in, the 5 p.m. people. And what do they get? They get 1 denarius. 1 denarius. Even though they barely worked an hour. I mean, if you picked them up at 5 to get back to the vineyard, they barely worked an hour, and they get a full day's worth of pay. Which leads the people who started early in the morning, as you can understand, to start to grumble a little bit. Well, that's not fair. But everybody gets a denarius. And again, maybe, I don't know, maybe you feel that. Maybe you feel slighted in some area in your life, and this is stirring something up in you. So they grumble to the master of the house, and they say, we worked all day. We bared the burden of the fullness of the day and the scorching heat, and you have made them equal to us. It's not fair. And they're right. It's not fair. It's not fair that the people who showed up at 5 p.m. should get so much money. If you think about it, the only people who were actually treated fairly were the people who got exactly what they agreed upon. The people who were grumbling are the people who were treated fairly. They got exactly what they had agreed upon. Everybody else, the 9 crew, the 12 crew, the 3 crew, and the last little bit of the hour crew, everybody else got treated unfairly, but to their benefit. Unfairly, but for their blessing. It's what we call grace. It's what we call generosity. You shouldn't have, above and beyond, not deserved. They did not earn this, but they receive it. And so, the master speaks to these grumbling first hour of the day, full day laborers, and he says, friends, I've done nothing wrong. Did you not agree on this? And here's the kicker. Look again at verse 15. He says, do you begrudge my generosity? Do you resent my graciousness? And Jesus is teaching us a very important kingdom principle. He's saying, in my kingdom, Christians, we will be a people who always celebrate when grace is extended. We celebrate when grace is extended. We do not begrudge, we celebrate. So now, how do we today apply this parable? Well, first, let me say, here's how we don't apply this parable. This parable is not for you business owners out there. This is not a model from Jesus for how you should pay your employees. Don't implement this into your human resource strategy. It probably won't be great for your company, though it's really kind-hearted. Now, Jesus' parables are there to teach us kingdom principles, how God's kingdom operates when Jesus' rule and reign comes to bear on any place, space, and time. whether it's current or future or all the way in heaven, the new heavens and the new earth. So this is not a parable about business. This is not a parable about fairness. This is a parable about the master. In the very first verse of this chapter, we see it. Look at verse 1. Jesus says, the kingdom of heaven is like a master of a house. So this parable is about the generosity of the master, not business, about the grace of the master, not fairness or justice. So where did these full-day laborers go wrong? When did they get bent out of shape? It's when they stop looking vertically at the master and they start looking horizontally at everybody else. And that's true in our lives, is it not? We can get bent out of shape when we look everywhere else and we stop looking first and foremost at the master, at the Father. If they never knew what everybody else made, they would have been really happy at the end of the day. Because they got work. They were able to make a wage. They were able to now feed their families. I mean, they would be happy. But because they started looking at everybody else and comparing their wages, now they're mad. Former President Teddy Roosevelt is often attributed with this quote, but I've heard it in many other places, that comparison is the thief of joy. When you start comparing, looking sideways, joy gets sucked out real quick, does it not? Mark Twain takes it a step further, replaces the word thief with death, and he says, comparison is the death of joy. Comparison will kill your joy. Maybe you've experienced this. Has anybody experienced this before? You're going along with life and you're content and you've got joy about your day. You're content and you've got joy about the work that you've accomplished. You're content and you've got joy about your family. You think, God's been good to me. But then you go and you open up your phone and you open up that app where everybody can post their thing. And you know what? Your day was spent in the office and their day was spent on the boat. And the joy gets sucked out of you. Your work, this was a good day's work. I feel accomplished. I feel like I did something. And then you see their work and they did the same thing you did and they started a nonprofit and wrote a book. You're like, stink, come on. And your joy's gone. Your family, you feel like you're barely getting by. And then you open it up and you see that influencer mama's Instagram account and she's showing her kids all with this spread of organic food in front of them, this perfectly crafted dinner, right? And then in the caption, she gives, let me give you 3 tips to be a better mom. And you're like, shut up, right? The joy is gone, right? I was so happy. Comparison is the thief of joy. You look sideways at what they've got rather than looking up and thanking God for what he has given you and say, wow, I really am blessed. Because there's always somebody who seems to have more than you, but there are, I'm telling you, millions upon millions of people that have much less than you. And we were never designed to compare our blessings, our gifts. We're designed to be grateful to a God who gives in accordance with his will. Can I confess something? This confession might even surprise my family because it happened this summer. I really enjoy playing miniature golf. Anybody like mini golf? I like mini golf. And here's my confession. One thing I really don't like about mini golf is I don't like keeping score. But for some reason, ever since I was young, somehow I'm always the guy stuck keeping score. And does anybody feel that with me? It is not fun because you got a club in one hand, and usually it's summertime, so I've got mesh shorts on with no pockets or something, and you got the club, and you got a card, and then you got that little pencil that just doesn't seem to fit nicely behind the ear. It's always, and I'm fumbling around, you got your ball, and then I got to keep score, and then you go, and you get everybody's score, and then there's never something to bear down on to record the score. So you're always kind of doing this number on your knee, you're poking holes through the paper. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Is it just me? All right, I'm just trying to be honest with you. And I find it frustrating, too. And I just want to play mini golf. Nobody cares if you won the game. Sorry to burst your bubble from this summer. If you got a hole-in-one, kudos. But you're not that awesome, right? I mean, it's whatever. It's keeping score is no fun. And the same is true in life. You know how to ruin a good time? Is start keeping score, like keeping tally marks. Well, they got this, and I didn't get that, but hopefully it's coming one day. I'm just going to do a mental checklist, or God's blessed them in this way. Why hasn't God blessed me in that way? And we keep score, right? We're doing math and keeping these mental tally marks. And the 6 a.m. workers, they were certainly keeping score, right? They got that much, so I should get, well, based on my performance, that much more. And when they started keeping score is when they lost their joy. And the same is true for all of us in life. You lose your joy. You know that pastors, we're not immune to this. Like, I know mini golf, but in real life, we're not immune to this either. I have seen some miserable pastors out there because they're keeping score of other people's ministries and other people's things that they have going on, and they're begrudging to God and to other people over it. Their church has more people. Their church has more resources. Their church has better staff. Their church has a bigger space, a nicer space, right? And the reason they probably got all that is because they're compromising, right? It's always like they're in sin or something. And when am I going to get mine? I've been at it for a really, really long time, right? I'm more faithful. God, when are you going to? What's wrong with us, right? I mean, this is ridiculous, but it happens. When they score and when we score, guess what? The ball's going into the same basket. Think back to June in the NBA Finals. I don't care if Jaylen Brown gets the basket. I don't care if Jason Tatum gets the basket. As long as we get the basket and we win it all and I can get the t-shirt, that's what matters, right? I don't care. I mean, yeah, maybe it's important to them, but if it goes in our basket, we all win. We all win. And so I got to be honest, same with the kingdom of God, and I've struggled with this in the past, and I've had to confess to God. But here's what I've learned to do over the years, is I've made a decision to celebrate when somebody else wins. Some other ministry has a success, when some other church grows or has a season of harvest. I make a point now to speak really highly of other pastors and ministries and churches. Why wouldn't I, right? It should be like intuitive, of course. Same team, same basket. Why wouldn't I? Their victories are our victories. They score, we score. We're all going to heaven together, right? It's the same big family that we're ultimately seeking to grow. So let me ask you a question. Will you keep score, or will you choose to celebrate? You've got to choose to celebrate. Will you pull out the little pencil, frustratingly keep tally of what everybody else has got going on, or you say, it doesn't matter, let's just have fun, let's just do what God's called us to do and enjoy ourselves and celebrate when people get blessed and celebrate when they get a hole-in-one, and let's just celebrate, right? God's given me blessings too. I'm having a good time. We choose to celebrate. And trust me, sometimes it really does have to be a conscious choice. Like, there's something, you can't help that gut check when it hits you. You know what I'm talking about? So you got to choose. I'm going to make a conscious choice. No, I will not compare. No, I will not be envious. God has blessed me. I'm going to count my blessings. I will celebrate them, and I will celebrate what God has given me, whatever it is, because I have a gracious, good God. So as we begin to wrap up here, I want to make sure that we have the correct perspective. This parable is not about an injustice that has been done. This parable is not about an unfair master. This parable is about a very gracious master who almost frivolously is just welcoming all people in. Come on in. Let me just make it rain on you. Let me just bless you. That's the heart of our God. That's the heart of our master. And notice again, back in the parable, the complaint of the grumbling 6 a.m. workers, because I think this is really important. They accuse the master of something, but I think it's actually really beautiful. Verse 12, they accuse him. You have made them equal to us. Sounds like a Pharisee, doesn't it? We've been living these righteous lives. How can that prostitute come and be forgiven? And we've been doing this or that. We've been here from the beginning. You've made them equal to us. And here's what's sad. They're saying it as if it's a bad thing. Like God's people should be like, you made them equal to us. We've been here for a long time, and they're just jumping in, and man, we're equal. God has leveled the playing field. That is something that we celebrate. That is something that we should want. And so this parable is about a gracious God who has a place for those people that nobody else wanted. The people who were left standing at the street corner all day long. The broken, the neglected, the abused, the refugee, the single parent who's struggling to get by, the young adult who feels lost in this big city, the people who have failed God and feel completely unworthy of God's love and attention. And God says to them, and to you in the room, God says, why are you standing here idle all day? I've got a place for you. I've got a purpose for you. Let's go. Come join me. Get over here to my vineyard. And when you read the Bible, the vineyard, throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament, the vineyard is a place of prosperity. It's a place where God's people gather. It's a place of God's blessing. Don't you want that for all people? We want that for all people. Think about that 11th hour person, that 5 p.m. person. I think there's no greater example of a 5 p.m. person than the thief on the cross. You know, Jesus is hanging on the cross, and he's got a criminal on his left and on his right, both also hanging on crosses. And on one side, he screams at Jesus and belittles Jesus. And on the other side, he says, what are you doing? Do you know who you're talking to? And then he says, Jesus, would you remember me today when you go into your kingdom? What does Jesus say? Today you will be with me in paradise. Guys, I think that's recorded for us so we can make sure that we understand that the thief on the cross, he was at the very end of his life. He did nothing to warrant what God gives him. He did nothing to earn it. He couldn't, okay, let me get my act together in these last few minutes, hours on this cross. I'm going to do everything in my power to honor you, God. I mean, he was on a cross as a criminal, naked, humiliated. Because it's never about what you did to earn it. It's about what he did. The perfect life that he lived. The death that he died that he did not deserve in your place and in my place. Are we mad at the thief on the cross getting the chance to be in heaven? No. I don't know any Christian who's like, that's not right. We celebrate that. We're like, that's a beautiful thing, right? I think about our sister in our church, Lauren Racine. A few years ago, some of you were here when she got up and shared her testimony about her father. Her mom had been praying for him for a long time. She and her siblings have been praying for him for a long time for him to come to know Jesus. And at 90 years old, the man gives his life to Christ. Gets baptized, and there's still today evidence that he is changed. Come on. Is anybody mad at that? Like, come on, what about those other 90 years that he could have spent living for Jesus? No. We're like, we all cheered. We were like, that's the best story ever. I'm never going to stop praying for my brother, my sister, whoever, my mom, my dad, my friend who doesn't know Jesus yet. Because maybe down to 90 years old, God can do it. Won't he do it? He can do it. I love that. And so let's be a people who get excited when we see God's grace extended. I know you are. Let's be that even more. Let's be a people who pray for those people standing on the street corner, so to speak, for those people who have not yet had the chance to come to the vineyard of the Lord. Let's join the master in looking for more. Like, oh, you got more to give? Okay, well, then let me go. I got other people. Come on. You know, there's a place for you. There's a purpose for you. Let's be a people who celebrate and not compare. Let's be a people of prayer. If you want to get your heart to a place where it's not comparing, just step further, go into prayer. Start praying for people. And then when they come, you're not going to go, come on, they get heaven just like I get heaven. You're going to be like, yes, they get heaven just like I get heaven. And when they meet the master, we say, I've been praying for you. I've been waiting for you. I'm so glad that you're here. In our time away, one thing that God has really just been stirring in my wife and I is that we just know that this is a new season in the life of our church. We're looking around and we've been talking to lots of people. It just seems like the church is at a healthier place than it's ever been. It seems like the Lord has set this church up for impact and for harvest after many years of labor. And so many of you guys have given so much, and we're so grateful. We believe that this is a season that we're entering into where God's gonna bring more people and keep growing, and we're ready for it, right? And so let's be a people who are going out there and saying, come on, and sharing the message of Jesus and praying for people and just being confident in the grace of our good and perfect master. He's not a slave owner cracking a whip. He's a good and perfect master of the house. And so let's join him in getting them. Let's join him in praying for them. And let's see what God does in this new season. Here's how I want to close. I want to close with the next few verses after this parable. I think it's really important to see what comes right after this parable. Pick up your Bible again, Matthew chapter 20, and now verse 17. So verse 16, the last will be first and the first last. And as Jesus was going up to Jerusalem, he took the 12 disciples aside, and on the way he said to them, "See, we are going up to Jerusalem. The Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and scribes, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him over to the Gentiles to be mocked and flogged and crucified, and he will be raised on the third day." We have no room to say, that's not fair about anything in life. You know what's not fair is the perfect Son of God hanging on a cross. If life was fair and we got what we deserved, that would be us. We would die for our own sin. But because life isn't fair, thank God, and God is gracious to us, he dies for our sin. Are you grateful that life is not fair? I'm grateful that life is not fair, but to our blessing and to our benefit. If you're here and you have never trusted your life over to Jesus Christ, I just want you to know he lived a perfect life for you. God became a man. He did not have to walk in our shoes as Jesus from Nazareth, but he chose to so that he could live perfectly the life we could never live, die the death that we deserved, not him. And then, because he's God, resurrect 3 days later, showing that he is powerful over all of your sin. All the things that you feel defeated by, he says, no, I defeated that. And he says, I want you to trust in that, and you can be brought into relationship with me. And then he ascends into heaven. He says, I'm preparing a place for you. And so follow me. And if that's you, you've never trusted in Jesus, don't feel like you are not worthy. You're not. Neither am I. And this is what I do for a career. None of us are worthy. Not a one of us. But Jesus was worthy. And he gifts that to you if you would trust in him. So the Bible says whoever calls upon the name of the Lord will be saved. The Bible doesn't say whoever would live this kind of life and earn it for 12 hours every single day. No. If you would trust in him. So would you trust in him if you haven't? And the rest of us, would you join me in praying that this would be a season where we see people standing on the corner, we see people who just feel like God has counted them out, that we would see people coming to meet Jesus, brought into relationship with the Master, living in this beautiful vineyard that we call the church. Fruitfulness and joy and family and unity, where he has made them equal to us. We're all equal. Would you join me in praying for that?